Thank you? Uh, thanks? I didn't even know what to say. Thank you, Kami. You're silly. Very silly. Anyways. I am bringing you a very, very special game here. It's very old. It's from the same studio as Dramatical Murder, as well as God, what was it called? Sweet something, and another one. And it's BL. It's a visual novel. Hi, Shay. And you better say thank you to Kami. And it's CATBOYS. It's CATBOYS. I wanted to cosplay Konoe at some point, but yeah. Since Dramatical Murder is not allowed over here on Twitch, I might play it for YouTube, but for now, we are going to dive into the world of CATBOYS, lots of politics, and yeah, I'm excited. I've watched parts of a Let's Play for this at some point. I'm not sure if we can ever finish it, and I really, I only tried for a second. I really hope it works. I might need this at some point. We'll see how far we can play this on here. Everything else will be somewhere else. Let me check everything up here real quick. There we go. Are you guys ready? Because I absolutely am. I'm not sure how long I'll be playing it today, but for a little bit, let's indulge in Lamento. Do let me know if it's too loud, by the way. Oh, it's quite loud. Even if the world killed you, I would not forget you. This game is so old, I swear. I have 2 hands and feet with 5 digits on each. I can stand and walk on my 2 feet. A god sang this song. I'm Milk. His wife was Rebecca, his wings a tail and ears. With she laid a rainbow egg. But the dazzling rainbow egg reflected too much sunlight. It made Rebecca avert her eyes and the egg fell. It hit a cloud and shattered. From inside the egg came a seed that was awoken by Rebecca's song. It bloomed and spread over the ground. Rebecca sang the song of the beginning. This is the story of the beginning. I love this track, by the way. Okay. It was this song of the beginning being sung. The singing cat conjured a melody along with his words. His voice came like a brook of water and sometimes swelled like an intense flame. Cats who passed by were stopped in their tracks enchanted. By the way, there is no English translation, no official one for this game. So this is like a fan translation. They forgot the daily clamor and savored that intoxication for just one moment. The string of the lute were plucked by his nails, crystal clear. The sounds it made poured forth and meshed with the song he sang, overflowing and sparkling around the poet. Cats sat down on the road and listened to the poet. Brilliantly, the earth seemed to fade, and they received the light that gently descended onto them. The remnants of the light drifted, glittering in the air. Voice, sound, light. Can fortunate meetings such as these really happen? Can such fluttering hearts truly meet by chance? A blissful smile graced the cat's lips. Let us savor it. Now is the time to share our joy. As the green scenery faded into the sunlight, The poet sang on. It has a fragile beauty before it is released to its end. There are multiple bad endings in this one as well, by the way, so we'll see. The song of the beginning is about the sadness, courage, and ferocity of the world. Sorry it's so loud, oh my god. Asato! Ah! Oh my god. This is so amazing. Lamento is from Niantic. It's a Japanese game. Oh my god, this is so nostalgic. Oh my god. You have no idea how excited I am. It's from 2006. Look at that. It's like a old ass game. It is so old. Oh my god. A world on the brink of death. This world is beautiful because everything is a lie. Because everything will die soon. The forests in which the leaves grow thickly, vividly. The warm light that shines down, the colorful flowers that bloom everywhere, beneath a clear blue sky. All of this is a lie. I had to change my whole system to Japanese, by the way. The world is now attacked by the void. The end is near. And I had to region swap it to install this, so it's beautiful. For things shine their brightest before death. I will not read the dubbed parts, by the way. You can't hear me. Wait, one moment. No. Let me adjust the volume a little bit. Because it is really loud, that's true. I'm gonna put it down on here. And I'm gonna put it on here. Is that better? I hope it is. Still the same. It looks better over on TikTok. Huh. I did lower it to like 20%. Testing. Okay. Maybe like this. Okay. I'm gonna leave it at that for now and then we'll see. Thunder rent the sky open. An ear-splitting scream echoed through the village. Aye, Alex, bye, Alex. From the sky, dark as night, rain poured down to the ground. The cats could only tremble and try to endure. Their ears drew back, their tails dropped, drooped listlessly, and their fur stood on end. Lamplight flickered in their rooms, casting creeping shadows on the walls and floor. On the village road, a cat, soaking wet, ran without cease. His quick feet splashed quietly in the water. He said nothing about where he was going and just ran onward. A bag slung over his shoulder absorbed the water and became discolored. It began to droop heavily, even though there wasn't much inside. His wet tail was also heavy. It was rare and unusual to be aware that it even existed, but now he thought about how troublesome it was becoming. The rain kept pounding. It chilled him to the marrow, and he wanted to return home soon, to dive into his warm bed and go to sleep. Lightning struck. When the sky shone bright white, the cat running to the village was silhouetted in black. The night moon was shrouded in darkness and could not be seen. The running cat finally reached the house, opened the door, and hurried inside. When he closed the door behind him, the sound of rain and thunder seemed to become distant, empty. The water dripping from his body wet the floor. The cat, Konoi, shook his head, scattering droplets of water to the walls and furniture. The room was dark. Konoi tossed his bag aside, not concerned that it had gotten everything wet. He drew a leaf out of a drawstring bag which stood by the door. Konoi put the leaf into a small dish on a shelf, wherein a small puddle of water was contained. A hazy light spread throughout the room. It wasn't much being so dim, but at least it was no longer as dark. He wanted to use fire as little as he could. Konoi didn't like using fire often. Instead, he used the guiding leaf. The leaf stored up light from the day moon, and when soaked in water, weakly emitted that light again. On pitch-dark, rainy days like these, the guiding leaves would shine. They guided the cats that lost their way, and hence got their name. Shouldn't you focus on practice? His home was illuminated with the faint light. If 3 cats his size entered his home, it would be filled to capacity. A small shelf, a pot, and a barrel each for food and water. There were only the bare necessities in this simple home. After he began to feel at ease again, Konoi finally laid down on his bed. The cloth was warm to the touch, and he began to purr instinctively. Konoi removed his shoes and took the sword from his belt. Then took off his coat and tossed it aside. Cats like Konoi, from a race called Ribika, no longer had much in common with their ancestors. Although the Ribika no longer had fur on their bodies like their ancestors did, they retained the need to groom the fur on their ears and tails, and the hair and skin of their arms. He carefully licked his damp fur. With his rough tongue acting like a brush, Konoi groomed for a while, still purring. His ears twitched in response to the thunder that occasionally echoed. The tip of his tail was wet and had begun to become a bit matted. Using his teeth, he untangled the fur, then he used his hands to carefully clean his ears. While licking his fingers, Konoi turned his gaze to the window. Rain still poured outside. He'd heard a scream outside earlier. Whose scream was it? This time, someone had probably been eaten. One by one, cats were disappearing. It was not the doing of devils or demons, but of the other cats of the village. It had become natural these days. He muttered, trying to fend off those dog thoughts. There was not a thing anyone could do. This was the erosion caused by the void. No one could stop it. Konoi noticed the bag he'd thrown down to the floor. and began to open it up with his long claws. The bag was wet and now began to shrink, so its contents were difficult to remove. He checked inside. It contained nuts, grass roots, and medical herbs he contained when he'd gone out to hunt. Obtained. Just those kinds of things. Nuts and berries were favorite foods among cats, and their bodies could thrive even without eating for several days. Therefore, there weren't many times when a cat felt like a lack of food was troubling. That didn't mean that they didn't need to eat some meat, though. But now, hunting for meat was difficult. The forest and the village, Kaoru, were being attacked by the void. The void. It was such a mysterious phenomenon. Apparently, it had begun around the time Konoe was born. A young female cat who had entered the forest to gather herbs had first noticed the void. When she returned to the village, her hand was stained a deep red. Tears falling onto her cut fingers, she said, "I didn't pick the herbs. I didn't touch them. Something like a knife cut my fingers." At first, no one understood what she meant. There was a plant called blade grass, so called because its long, thin leaves could cut one's fingers if you were not careful. The cats of Kaoru thought that she had tried to pick blade grass by accident. No one took her seriously. Who could have guessed it would become such a nightmare? Eventually, the other cats began to experience the same thing. Soon, every living thing in the forest became dangerous to touch. Nothing physically seemed off about the forest, but the plants, the birds, the bugs and butterflies, no one could be touched, as if they rejected the cats. As if matter itself had been rejected by reality. Cats were rejected by the earth. All breathing things in the forest seemed to no longer be compatible with them. Touching them caused pain and left cuts. Even the fruit they used to eat began to reject them. But it did not happen all at once, I assure. Like a sickness that destroyed a body from within, the void slowly crept from the edges into the center of the country of Sisa, cornering the cats. The void had not reached the center yet, but the area where Konoe was located was breathing its last breaths. All he could do was search the forest for places untouched by the void to try and find some food. Mice and birds were now dangerous and constantly moving, maybe escaping from a forest that had already fallen to the void. Cats who attacked them were paralyzed with pain. Some even died. The food stores soon began to run out. What could starving cats eat? Konoe broke that train of thought and regarded what things he'd gathered, then tossed them into a storage pot. He wasn't hungry, but he was thirsty, so Konoe moved to the barrel of water. He opened it up, dipped his head down, and lapped up some water. Once he was done, Konoe covered the barrel again and began to stretch. His eyelids felt heavy. Being out in the rain this long would probably make him sick. He should rest. Konoe wiped his lips and returned to bed. Konoe finished grooming and curled up under the blanket. He breathed in the familiar scent of home, and his eyes closed. His tail curled around his body. For a moment, the scream echoed in his head, but he dismissed the thought. Konoe huddled down, alone, but he wasn't lonely. In fact, he was used to solitude. Today was cold. Maybe tomorrow would be bright and warm, and he could dry off. With these thoughts in mind, Konoe fell asleep. Just like he wanted, the next day was warm. He woke up, stretched out, and began to groom himself. Then he took his wet bag and coat and hung them up to dry in the light of the day's moon. He put on his clothes, picked up a nut to eat, and went outside to begin his daily routine by inspecting his territory. I wonder if I can save. I don't know how to save. Oh, with S. Cool. No. Alright. Cool, I figured it out. On the southwest side of Sisa was the village named Kaoru. The male cats here were raised from birth to be strong fighters. But after the arrival of the void, just surviving took all of their strength. The village seemed silent and dead. There were homes there and there, but it was rare to see cats outside. They kept to themselves. Konoe finished looking over his territory and returned home. By then, the moon of light had already begun to set. Sisa did not have a sun, just a moon of light and a moon of shadow. No one really knew why, and it had been this way since the dawn of the Ribika race. According to a legend, the sun sank into the sea long ago. Sisa, where the Ribika lived, was surrounded on all sides by a sea that was colored golden, supposedly colored by the fallen sun. Instead of a sun, they now had two moons, the moons of shadow and the moon of light. From the west, the moon of light rose and shone brightest at noon, while the moon of shadow rose from the east to look over the earth after dark. So it had been passed down from generation to generation. When the sun fell into the sea, the world was shrouded in darkness. The wife of our god divided the moon in two so that it would always shine down on our world. Tukane was said to be the god who shaped this world. It was said that he was named so because he walked on legs like two sticks. He was sometimes also called Solid Leg. The name of the race, the Ribika, came from the name of his god's wife, who was said to have the shape of a cat. The Ribika knew what cats looked like from reading the ancient texts left by the Tucanes. Despite the difference in size, their ears and tails were the same. And so the Ribika called one another cats. But what Tukane looked like was something long forgotten. Only the name gave the cats a clue as to what he could look like. Konoe headed towards the village with the light of dusk warm on his back. Yes, Kami did gift again. Today, Tokino was supposed to come by. He was a peddler cat from Sisa's largest town, Ransen. About the same age as Konoe, Tokino helped his father with his work. His mother, however, had died shortly after she gave birth to him. Konoe's parents were also deceased. His father before he was even born, and his mother passed off illness when he was young. He didn't have a close relationship with the other village cats, but that was fine by him. He hated the cats of this village. No one helped anyone else, everyone only looked out for their own interests. But he could live alone. So far he didn't need the help of the other cats. And even when faced with death, Konoe didn't think he'd want it. But Tokino was different. Even when they first met, they got along well, as odd as that was to him. Tokino was carefree and easygoing, but Konoe was just the opposite. Maybe that could work out. Tokino always shared stories about Ransen, and Konoe, who never left Kaoru, enjoyed these stories. Wasn't he supposed to arrive soon? Konoe quickened his pace.
Oi!
Suddenly, a voice called out from behind him, straightforward and severe.
待てよ、コノエ。
It was a familiar voice. Konoe had a bad feeling about it. He tried to ignore it at first, but stopped when he heard a loud growl. This would become troublesome. When he looked around, he saw the male cat he'd suspected. It was Sin. Silhouetted black against the evening moon, the other cat lowered his ears aggressively. Territory. Konoe made his disdain for that term quite clear. Sin and Konoe's territories overlapped a bit. Sin and Konoe had fought over territory before. Sure, their territories overlapped, but it was to such a small degree that Konoe considered it trivial. Quarrels like these were not uncommon. Despite the hunger, the cat's fighting spirit remained alive and well. Or maybe it was exactly that hunger that made them so on edge. Sin narrowed his eyes, which gleamed with delight. The need to divert one's mind was disguised as a territorial dispute. It was rather depressing. Come to think of it, he always considered it that way. Besides, Tokino was probably waiting for him at the village entrance. Yes, Mello, this is Lamento Beyond the Void, a very old visual novel game with CATBOYS from Niantic, same company that made Dramatical Murder, Togainu no Chi, and there was another one that I forgot the name of. Sin growled from in the depths of his throat. Ooh! Mellow! Thank you! Tokino, if spelled Tokino, means when. Sin threw himself at Konoe. Konoe jumped back quickly and drew his sword. Sin's blade aimed several stabs at Konoe's throat, but Konoe blocked these blows. While parrying Sin's blade with his own, Konoe gathered power at the left side of his body. Ah. I don't know how I did that. Oh. Okay, wait. Configure. Let me just do the music a little lower. While parrying... I read that. He then lashed his left hand out to claw at Sin's chest. Sharp fingernails tore Sin's clothes and he staggered. This gave Konoe a chance to aim for one of Sin's arms, the one that held the knife. But right at the last second, Sin pulled away and kicked up his leg. Both of them separated, opening up some distance between them. The air between the two of them was scorching hot with tension. Sin shouted with intense, murderous intent, and the two of them stared each other down, growling. Before I knew it, Konoe's ears folded back, the hair on his body stood on end, and his pupils contracted to needle-like slits. In time of extreme agitation, the pupils of Ribika narrowed. It was impossible to lie with eyes like that. No matter how much a cat may pretend to be calm. Sin cried out and charged forward at Konoe again. Konoe bared his fangs and brandished his sword. He dropped down low to avoid an attack, feeling a sharp wind at his neck. At the same time, he twisted and aimed a kick at Sin's lower body. Sin noticed his movement and began to shift, but Konoe was able to make his heel connect with Sin's side. Sin lost his balance and Konoe pushed off from the ground, pouncing. He kicked off the trunk of a tree to accelerate further, then pushed off towards Sin. Sin tried to stand up and jump back, but within another instant, Konoe's shadow was over him. Sin was caught, and a cloud of dust kicked up when he fell. Konoe pressed his struggling body down by pushing a knee against his chest, then dug his claws into Sin's shoulder and bared his fangs. In his right hand, Konoe brandished his sword. A frightened look entered Sin's eyes. Konoe stepped his sword into the ground right beside Sin's face. Sin's eyes opened wide and his mouth opened and closed voicelessly several times. Konoe brought his face close enough to feel the downy fur of his opponent's ears and stared into Sin's eyes. That intense aggression of Sin's was gone now. His eyes were open, his pupils dilated wide. Konoe stood up and withdrew his sword from the ground. Sin panicked and stood up, his tail between his legs and his ears low. Konoe began to walk away. He needed to hurry to get to the village's entrance. Thanks for sharing, everybody. Konoe had been walking, but now stopped in his tracks. Those words he heard lit a flame somewhere in his heart. Why did this guy need to bring up trivial things like this? Konoe turned, pulled out his sword, and threw it. It was stuck in the earth near the fallen Sin's feet, and a miserable scream echoed. Sin curled his tail between his legs and fled when he heard Konoe's strong tone. Once he saw that Sin's figure was leaving for shore this time, Konoe walked off with a brisk pace. Am I ticklish? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. A rough breath escaped, filled with pent-up anger. Orphans. What a trivial thing. When other cats talked about it, it didn't matter. Still, when other cats pointed it out, Konoe felt angry. He had respected his parents over anyone else. Konoe had a memory from when he was young, when his mother told him, "You are a precious child of this earth, and you are loved." But was that love? Konoe couldn't answer it. Something like that didn't seem real to him. It seemed important, despite being impossible to understand. Without pausing his feet, Konoe surveyed his surroundings. No matter how much noise he'd make, no other cats had exited their homes. It was normal in Kaoru. The battles and their victims. Maybe some of them even thought it was good that other cats died, because maybe that way they could overcome the starvation just a little longer. The evening moon dyed the sky red. Something stirred inside him. Maybe something exciting would come to pass, so he thought. On his way to the village entrance, he stopped. Another territorial dispute was taking place. 3 cats were fighting, 2 versus 1. Maybe 2 of them were Toga and... His eyes narrowed unintentionally. Sanga and Toga, they fought in tandem. On the singing cat and the other the fighting cat, respectively. The Toga's fighting abilities were nothing unusual. Many of the Kaoru cats were Toga, but the Sanga's powers were decided from the moment they were brought into the world. Only those with an innate power could develop into a Sanga. The role of the Sanga was to support the Toga through a special song. There were many kinds, those who sang or played musical instruments, or those who gave out the melody from their very bodies. That gave strength to the toga, a toga with a sangha, and without one, the difference was vast. Such a scene was now unfolding before Konoe's eyes. He'd heard rumors of it in Kaoru, but this was the first time he'd actually seen it in action. The toga brandished his sword, and the sangha clasped his hands in front of his chest, closing his eyes. The opposing toga shuddered, knowing he should be afraid. Desperate, the foe raised his voice in a cry and rushed towards the sangha. If the sangha was killed, the chances of winning became greater. The support of a sangha was too great of a threat. While the toga brandished his blade, the sangha opened his eyes. A singing voice sounded. No, rather than a voice, it was a sound that resounded within his ears. The body of the sangha shone brightly, and the light flowed to the toga. The toga received this song and was gone within another moment. No, he was not gone. When Konoe finally realized it, the toga had already buried his sword deep into the chest of his opponent. It all happened in a split second. The cat that was pierced by the sword fell to the ground, his face contorted with pain. Such was the power of the sangha. Cats were usually agile on their feet, but this speed was incredible. Having a sangha around meant victory or defeat. This sangha and toga pair left without even casting another glance at the dead cat. Feeling like he was trapped in a dream, Konoe remembered to exhale. His heart beat like a drum. His head felt hot. Quiet excitement whirled in his body. He wondered what it was like to receive power from a sangha's song. After a moment, he became aware that his tail was stiff and puffed out. Once they left, there was only dead silence. The victim's breath had been cut short with just one blow. The smell of blood hung in the air. Sooner or later, this body would be collected as a sacrifice, as food. Konoe was hesitant about just leaving it there. He approached the corpse. Its face was frozen in a fearful expression. It was the look of a person who did not want to die. Konoe put his hands on both sides of the body and lifted it up. He tried to drag it to the forest, but stopped. There was another person there. Konoe clicked his tongue. A shadow hid in the bushes of the forest. Maybe it wasn't alive. When he sniffed, he smelled a faint but horribly disgusting odor. The shadowy corpse had a faint puddle of liquid around it, like a puddle of rain. Konoe lowered his eyebrows. The void attacked him. The corpse could not return to the earth. The body had decayed but could not melt into the earth, so all it could do was build up on top of the dirt. Just outward appearance were nothing when trying to find traces of the void. Konoe put the corpse he was holding in another place, away from there. When he looked at the corpse, he recalled the scream from last night. Of course, this cat didn't want to die, but still, death seemed like a form of salvation now. At least, it was better than being a sacrifice. Konoe turned his back and began to run. Some time had passed, so he needed to hurry to the village entrance. Konoe saw a lonely shadow standing by the side of the entrance to the village and quickened his pace. The cat in profile had heavy baggage and at his feet and was looking up at the sky. It was definitely Tokino. Tokino heard his footsteps and raised his ears, a smile crossing his face. Oh right, I forgot what a cutie he was.
待たせた。ごめん。全然。一巡りの月ぶりか。元気そうでよかった。そっちも。
Konoe was actually more glad than he expected to be. He didn't know exactly why, but Tokino's bright demeanor made him smile. In this world, methods to count the dates were passed down from the time of two canes. The time between the rise of the moon of light and setting of the moon of shadows was one day. 7 days were called a seven moon, and 30 cycles made a round moon. No one knew just why the 7th and 13th day were chosen, but because it was knowledge from two canes, no one argued with it. Tokino pushed lightly against his shoulder. Konoe affectionately returned the greeting. Tokino let out a small, pleased purr, but turned inquisitive.
あれ、この絵なんかしてきた？ここへ来る前にちょっと。
If you say so.
喧嘩したの？
はーい。
縄張りのことでやたらと絡んでくるやつがいたから。縄張りか。
Tokino muttered with a distant look. Ranzin, where Tokino lived, was Sisa's most prosperous city. Diplomacy with other lands was limited thanks to the enormous coral reef that surrounded Sisa. As a result, Sisa developed independently. Even so, Ranzin was always taking in visitors, with cats passing in and out day and night. Hence, the cats of Ranzin were not very territorial.
喧嘩ってもちろんこの絵が勝ったんだよな。ああ。怪我とかしてないか？大丈夫だ。そっか。よかった。
Tokino smiled and laughed, giving a teasing shrug.
でも、うちは薬の種類も豊富だから、怪我しても大丈夫だよ。俺にまで商売するつもりか、お前。まあね。
Mane. Tokino bent down and reached into the heavy luggage near his feet. It was a large, durable woven basket, which he could hang over his shoulder on a stick. From food to medicine, a variety of things were packed in there. At first glance, Tokino had a thinner build than Konoe, but after a closer look, one could see that Tokino's arms, shoulders, and hands were rougher and stronger than Konoe's. It was probably life as a peddler that shaped him this way. But today, Tokino seemed tired. The weight of the basket made him stagger, and fatigue showed on his face.
ふらついてるぞ。ああ、うん。もうすぐ乱線で大きな祭りがあるからさ。その準備で今ちょっと忙しくて。でも大丈夫。
Tokino fell on his backside before he could finish speaking. The heavy basket he was carrying made a loud thud.
やっちゃったよ。
Tokino scratched his head with a raised smile. Konoe smiled at the situation. He figured he'd just take the basket from Tokino. It was okay. He was having fun now. Konoe grasped the pole of the basket and turned it around. Tokino stood up in a hurry, dusted off his bottom, and shook his head in a panic.
いいよこの絵、悪いから。疲れてるんだろ。でもそれ重いし、それに俺慣れてるしさ、気にしないで。
気にしないで。
転ばれて気にするなって方が無理だ。
Tokino's eyebrows lowered as if in apology. Konoe hefted the basket onto his shoulders. It felt like his body might fall. His ears turned down and he looked embarrassed.
これで。
Then Konoe extended 3 fingers in front of Tokino.
何が？
He blinked several times, confused.
だから。何の話だよ。クイム。ああ、そういうことか。
Tokino raised his tail, his eyes sparkling with happiness, and nodded. Creams were a type of nut-like sweet and sour fruit, and they were popular among the Ribika. Konoe loved them. So, since Tokino didn't want him to just carry that basket, Konoe decided to make a trade.
そんなことしなくてもいつもお土産に持ってきてるじゃないか。
Tokino's so
コノエの好
ginger.
物なんだし。
I mean, yes.
カゴを持つ口実だよ。
口実って
堂
々と言うなよ。
さっき転んだ時大丈夫だったか？
ああ、全然平気。ピンピンしてるよ。
Tokino stumped his feet on the ground and let out a laugh. Konoe gave him a teasing smile in return.
お前もついでに背負っていこうか？
は？
Tokino's eyes widened, an amusing expression. It made Konoe turn away to hide his laughter.
お前な。いいさ。そうやって笑ってればいいだろう。
Tokino seemed to be offended but came around immediately. Konoe carried the basket steadily, but it was definitely heavy. Even so, he talked with Tokino the whole time they walked home. Oh, my back's starting to hurt. Ugh. Konoe spoke with Tokino about various things while swishing his tail in a relaxed manner. Tokino carried all kinds of food and drink in his basket to be sold, along with some more unusual wares. Konoe pulled out a cream, dried fruits, and herbs. He put all these in a bowl and ground them together with a pestle.
それ何？
Konoe presented Tokino the bowl.
舐めてみろよ。
この粉？
別に腕の部分を舐めたければ止めないけど。
嘘。いただきます。
Tokino picked up some of the admittedly unappetizing powder with his finger and licked it off. At first he looked stern, but his eyes suddenly sparkled.
うまい。甘酸っぱくて。
一緒に混ぜた草に酸味があるんだ。乾燥させると青臭さが抜けるから、こうやって食べると意外と合う。
While he spoke, Konoe also gathered some with his fingers and licked it up. A somewhat sour taste spread through his mouth.
へえ。果物と草を混ぜるのってこっちじゃあまり聞かないな。コノエってこういうのよく知ってるよな。
別にたまにいろいろ試したりしてるから。
そっか。
Talking about other things all the while they ate. As usual, Tokino had plenty of interesting stories to share, but one topic in particular began to concern Konoe. Recently, monsters and demons seem to have appeared in the forests around Ransen.
帰りは？
そんなに頻繁に出てくるわけじゃないらしいから。襲われたって話も聞かないし、一応飽きない猫たちの間で流れてる安全なルートってやつがあるんだ。でも気をつけなくちゃな。野党も出るらしいし。
Even though Tokino was smiling, Konoe felt uneasy. Tokino prepared to leave before it got too late. He was supposed to be leaving Kaoru before midnight.
はい。約束だろ。
Tokino handed Konoe 4 small red creams before leaving the house.
一つ多い。
一つは俺の気持ち。今度来るときはもっと持ってくるよ。
Ah,
いい。カゴを担いだ報酬だし。
welcome back, Kami. Tokino just laughed and shrugged it off.
わかったよ。頑固だな、コノエは。
お前に言われたくないな。
そっか。
Tokino seemed to have remembered something and lowered the basket, pulling out something from inside.
はい、これ。
He held out a red flower known as sekiyami.
コノエ、この花の匂い好きだろ？
別に好きってほどじゃ。
Konoe muttered and turned his face away, but his tail shook happily.
尻尾は嘘をつけないってさ。はい。
Konoe took the flower reluctantly and Tokino shouldered his basket again. Konoe
それじゃあまた来る。 怪我や病気には気をつけて。
He's a badass. That's what he is.
そっちこそ帰り道は用心しろよ。
ああ。
Konoe raised his tail while waving goodbye, and Tokino disappeared into the night. While he watched his friends back, Konoe felt a sense of fulfillment. Meeting Tokino was always like this, but at the same time he felt a little anxious. Konoe had a bad feeling, like a premonition. He tossed one of the queens that he had gotten from Tokino into his mouth and savored the flavor. First, sweetness spread through his mouth, followed by sourness. I don't really think I am either. Konoe looked to the rest of the fruit, then to the sky. High above, the moon of shadow shone its cool blue light, and it poured over him. Konoe started to head back inside his house, but a light caught his eye. A flame flickered in the quiet village. In front of a certain home, a torch was placed. Seeing it, Konoe remembered the scream from last night. 2 cats would be sacrificed today. That was the house of one of the victims. It was the last resort for the cats who suffered from hunger because of the void. In the present situation where food was not widespread, it wasn't unusual to see dead bodies. Under normal circumstances, corpses would be buried with respect. But the instinct to survive justified brutality, and that was how the cats of the village were now. For cats starving with hunger, a body was food. It was only flesh from which a soul had already left. However, it wasn't every day that someone died. If they ran out of corpses to eat, the next attack would be aimed at living bodies. The old cats were the first to go. Next were the women and children who were weaker. Some time ago, Kaoru had fallen into this hellish nightmare. The number of females and children decreased dramatically. An epidemic had spread amongst the female cats. The sickness. The high emergence rate and mortality of the disease had led to a sharp decrease in their population. Now there was not even a single female in Kaoru. In order to manage the situation, the leader of Kaoru had made a decision. Every 3rd moon, or if starvation was severe enough, every 2nd moon, a sacrifice would be chosen. Out of necessity, the village chose a sacrificial cat in order to fill up their bellies of the cats. This was not something limited to just Kaoru. It seemed to be performed in other villages as well, but it was not mandatory to eat the sacrifice. A cat will eat what it wants to eat. The practice was worthy of disdain, and of course, there were never any volunteers. Some cats couldn't take such a cruel decision and thought about fleeing the village. However, beyond the southern forest, there was a high cliff, and the void consumed the forest to the north. It was difficult to leave the village, so everyone lived in fright, wondering if they would be the next sacrifice. 2 shadows stood in front of the house with the burning torch. Most likely, one of these 2 cats was the sacrifice. The other may have been of close relation to the first. They were separating. Tonight was the night before his death. Konoe began to think while he watched the appearance of the 2 sullen cats. When he was chosen as a sacrifice himself, what would happen? What would he do? He was alone. No one would grieve over him. His mother had died and had barely managed to return to the earth without being eaten by the other cats. But when she succumbed to her illness, no one extended a helping hand. Konoe was young then, but he remembered it well. Well, Kami, it was Sethi and I gambling, it wasn't just me. At that time, things were already beginning to become harsh in the village, so it might have been their only choice. But Konoe was still unable to forgive them. He could not forget the eyes of the cats who looked down on his mother as if she were a nuisance who needed to hurry up and die. But he only felt it slightly. Konoe didn't have any parents or a spouse. He could be eaten without any impact on the other members of the village. Konoe could be chosen soon. At that time, he wondered if they would eat him quietly. Would they quietly crush him between their jaws and fangs, his bones, flesh, eyes, ears, everything? His soft voice cracked from the depth of his throat. He hated it. Konoe refused to become a sacrifice for people he hated. He could live alone. He already lived by himself. Konoe was already alone. But what if there was someone he wanted to help? Not to just satisfy someone, but to help. Could he be sacrificed? If there was actually someone Konoe thought he'd wanted to help, would he think I'd be okay if I died for them? What kind of feeling was that? Konoe broke off the thought that had begun to wander. He became aware that his tail's fur was standing on end. There was no use in thinking about a thing that wasn't going to happen. All Konoe could do was struggle to live through tomorrow. He could not afford to empathize with the sorrow of others. So, the one he sympathized with was no one. There was a thread of sadness that had begun to twine around his heart. The feelings of the two cats surged through him, and Konoe's knees buckled. Konoe had always been that way. He had felt it yesterday during his quarrel with Sin. For some reason, his heart occasionally empathized with the hearts of others. If he had to put it in words, he would say it felt as though water was flowing into his heart. It was not a comfortable thing at all. They were rarely good feelings, either. Negative feelings were more common and sometimes very strong. When it happened, Konoe felt like he was ruled by the emotions of the others. It was painful and unpleasant. Therefore, Konoe usually controlled his heart and tried not to empathize with others. If he lived alone, then he wouldn't suffer. Konoe turned his face away from the torch and headed home. The decisions in this game are, as far as I remember, very far-reaching, as in they really play an impact. Let me think for a moment. Let me think. What would you pick? Personally, I would say think about the sacrifice. But, well. I think I'm going to think about the sacrifice. Oh, I'm not sure if it was important for his character development, that is. The crackling sound of the torch annoyed him. It wasn't that loud, but Keiju was aware of many things today. It was an important day. A hateful day. In the presence of the other cat, Naki, he felt like he was already being torn apart. All that was said some time ago was the word why. He found it hard to think of anything else to say. Naki muttered in an unexpectedly calm voice. Naki reached his hand out towards Keiju's wilting ears. His body trembled subtly. This was the last day he would feel Naki's thin fingers, and after today, he would never be touched by this hand ever again. He felt like a kid again. His heart wavered.
どうして？それは今まで生贄になった猫たちもみんなそう思ってるよ。分かってるそんなこと。でもどうして？
What a ridiculous law. Keiju understood that the situation was serious and something had to be done. But endorsing cannibalism was just insane. Was the world driven to such madness now? It felt like his body was being torn apart from the inside. Keiju felt like he was going mad. He put his hands on Naki's cheek and slowly traced down his neck to his shoulders and finally his chest. Everything that embodied his beloved Naki would be defiled by the bellies of the other cats. How could he let such a thing happen?
みんなそうなんだよ。みんな苦しんでる。
Keiju averted his eyes, knowing this was true. More and more, Keiju gave himself over to sorrow. I think I remember what happens next. I'm not 100% sure. If it happens, trigger warning. But if not, then maybe I remembered it wrong. But I do think a trigger warning might be appropriate. It became unbearable, and Keiju hugged Naki with all of his might. Trigger warning, cannibalism. He is mine. He is mine and mine alone. Please, somebody, help. I want to take Naki away from here. I want to go to a place far away beyond this earth. This was what he wished from the bottom of his heart.
Keiju, 痛い。
Keiju was startled back to reality by Naki's strained voice, and he loosened his grip, noticing that his fingernails had dug into Naki's shoulder.
ごめん。
Panicking, he soothed the wound with his tongue. Naki only purred softly and turned his gaze to Keiju.
ねえ、ケイジュ。一つだけ頼みがあるんだけど。頼み？
So, like, in general, this game is quite focused, as many of Niantic's visual novels are on very heavy topics, especially politics and cannibalism are a very big part of this game, if I remember correctly. So, yeah, I do not remember a lot of the Let's Play that I watched, and I never finished watching it, that is, because the quality was not good. But there were a few very gruesome scenes in there, so yeah. And if I remember it correctly, this is one of them. Keiju stopped licking the wound and looked at Naki.
そう。これだけはどうしてもケイジュじゃなきゃダメなんだ。
Naki's tail was shaken. His eyes were full of strong will, so very unlike Keiju's, which were on the verge of busting into tears.
もう明日にはみんなに食べられてしまうだろう。だから。
Naki smiled and gently touched Keiju's cheek. The tip of his thin fingers moved inwards from his cheek and reached his lips, then pressed them open and pushed into Keiju's mouth.
Naki!
Surprised, Keiju took his hand. For the first time, Naki seemed like he was going to weep. He bit his trembling lip.
本当は不平等だから掟を破ることになるけど。
Yeah.
でも。
Yeah, I remember it correctly.
一番最初に食べてほしい。
Okay.
ナキ、何言って。
Yeah, trigger warning for cannibalism, please. And, harm. Body harm? Body horror, whatever.
本当は全部がいい。けどそうしたら、ケイジュがみんなに責められるだろう。そんなのは嫌だから。
Naki shut his mouth as if holding something back, then rolled up his sleeve and presented his snow-white arm.
ほら、ここ。一番柔らかくて食べやすいとこ。ここ、食べてほしい。このくらいなら多分大丈夫だと思うから。何言って。
Keiju was speechless. He didn't know what to say to Naki and he shook his head. Eat this now?
ナキ、そんなこと。食べてよ。
Naki suddenly hissed, his voice a desperate whisper. The hair on Keiju's tail stood up at the sound. Naki had the air of a demon, like he was possessed. Welcome back, Milk. Also for you, trigger warning coming up for cannibalism.
嫌なんだ。本当は僕だって。だけど逆らえない。逃げたってきっと生きられない。どうせ死ぬんだ。
Naki's eyes filled with tears.
刑事だって腹減ってるだろう。少しでも足しにしてよ。それで僕を刑事の中に留めておいてほしい。ほんのひとかけらの血と肉でいいんだ。
Naki choked on his words and began to cry, his shoulders shaking. Keiju felt like he was going mad. Why? 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 Only that word resounded on in Keiju's head. Hunger did not matter. Such a thing was not a problem. He just wanted to be with Naki. Why? However, it was the wish of his most beloved friend. His last wish. Tears overflowed from Keiju's eyes as he took Naki's arm. His tears obstructed most of his vision. Naki's hair shone brilliantly in the light of the torch, and Keiju found it beautiful. He gently licked at the white skin, careful not to cause the smallest bit of pain. Naki gently touched his head with his other hand.
ほぐさなくていいよ。痛い方がいいんだ。
Keiju's feelings seemed to have built up to the point that they would burst from his chest. He didn't know what to say. All Keiju could do was to stop licking while shedding tears. Keiju bared his fangs and sank them into Naki's arm. Naki's body quivered. A stifled whimper escaped from his mouth. His tail bristled and stood stiff between his legs. Keiju's fangs dug into the soft, fair skin with a tearing noise, and the elasticity of Naki's skin gave out. Blood flowed in his mouth. It was so sweet he wanted to weep. This was the taste of Naki's blood. It was the taste of his beloved cat's blood. Even the smell of iron was sweet. Nausea rose in his throat, but he felt neither surprised nor upset. Keiju firmly held Naki's trembling body. He continued to bite harder. Keiju granted Naki his wish by piercing him with his fangs, smearing him with tears and blood and chewing on his soft flesh. Konoe returned home some time after midnight. Sleep did not come to him easily when he went to bed, and his thoughts drifted for a while. Soon he fell asleep without noticing, and had a dream. I know the scene that is coming up now is a little bit longer, and I do think this is enough Lamento for today. Because this is a very intense game, a very deep game, and a very partially traumatizing game. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna end the stream here because I want to upload all of this on YouTube. And therefore I'm gonna end it here. I'm going to put that part on YouTube already, and we're gonna continue this tomorrow. However, I'm gonna ask Kami if she wants to play some Phasmo, and if she wants to play some Phasmo, I am going to stream that with her over on Discord. So, until then, I am telling you bye-bye. And I will see you over on Discord, probably. So, see you.